Welcome to this exciting session of Norrsken Investment Sprint. I'm Fredrika Westman, the Strategic Partnership Manager at Norrsken Foundation, and today I have the privilege of interviewing Björn Öste, the serial entrepreneur and the industry disruptor, also co-founder of Oatly. We're here to learn the tips and tricks of how to raise your first round of capital and also understand how to even disrupt the whole industry. Welcome, Björn.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining.
If we're going to cover that in 30 minutes, we better get going, right? That's no small order.
Exactly. But just for those who don't know, of course, back in the 1990s, you and your brother founded Oatly, one of the biggest success stories in Sweden, recently valued at $2 billion. You're now part of the board, no longer working with the operations, and you're also so busy with running and founding several new impact tech startups in the food industry. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you've been up to apart from founding Oatly?
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, it really is, everything ties back into Oatly. When my brother started tinkering with developing oat milk, it's not really fair to say that it's his innovation alone. He was very good at tying together a team of multidisciplinary scientists covering a broad area, everything from clinical medical expertise to food and food processing, oats and protein and enzyme technologies and whatnot. And as Oatly started to grow around 2008, we decided that we had such an incredible potential vehicle here for other innovations. It was almost a disservice to the team to lock them up inside of an Oatly structure, right? So we, 2008, cut them loose and formed an independent R&D team that we call Aventure. Excuse me, it's based, headquartered out of Lund. With the idea to continue developing revolutionary new foods that we could patent protect, so we could buy ourselves a time monopoly as we were launching the products. But we also decided that our specific angle and area of expertise is to develop foods that actually addresses some of the most critical medical issues or health issues in the world today, right? The metabolic syndrome in particular, but not necessarily limited to that. What I'm talking about are, of course, the conditions of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc., all typically caused by eating the wrong stuff and possibly not exercising enough. And to our surprise, I guess, very few seems to follow that path. So we feel we're pretty alone and pretty unique in that we actually make the effort of clinically proving products. It's almost like if they were pharmaceuticals, right? But they're not pharmaceuticals. They're not here to cure, but to help prevent, right? And so I guess that alongside building Oatly, that's been our passion and our focus in our life. And the bigger the Oatly has gotten over the years, the more focus personally for me has been on developing some of these brands and some of these technologies that we're now taking to market.
So you founded not just one company, of course, you founded a lot of companies and in a lot of different geographies and helping them scale. Today we're here to talk about how to raise capital. We have a lot of early stage startups or founders of such startups with us in the audience. So how would you describe what the life is like of a startup founder? What is that like? What are some of your memorable moments?
Well, I don't want to be too graphic because that might scare people away from actually doing it, right? but I think what's been key for me in my life, and I don't know how many companies I've helped start now, probably 15 or so by now, right? And far from all have been successful, right? Some are happily buried, and some we sold early, and some we sold too late, and some we shouldn't have sold at all, and so I think I've seen all the sides of the coin, but yeah, I mean it's it's a wealth of experiences to learn from there. But I think the key to any success is to lead with passion and lead with the heart, right? And if you don't believe in what you're doing, because being a startup, and I mean, it's that 3 o'clock in the morning when your head is spinning, you have a critical problem, and you know, you just cannot nail it. And well, actually, usually I do nail it between 3 and 4 in the morning, right? That seems to be the most productive, for some odd reason, most productive time when you have a real critical problem.
Yeah.
But you have a lot. You are inevitably going to face issues with staff, with market, with customers, with supply, whatever it is, financing, right? And if you're not really passionate about what you're doing, if you don't really do something that add another dimension, that I mean, it's going to be really hard to track through those heavy moments. And in fact, if you lead with the passion and you're really into what you're doing, I feel that when you come out of these crises that you inevitably will have, right? You feel so much stronger, and you feel so much, you know, better. If it doesn't kill you, it strengthens you, and it's so true for an entrepreneur, for sure, right?
Can you give an example of a time that you thought like this is gonna kill me, but it didn't? It made you stronger. What was that? Which company was that, and what happened?
Well, I mean, in early days at Oatly, I mean, we've had a number of. I think we've had several situations where we thought we weren't going to make it, right? Because I mean, we've had issues with production, for example. All of a sudden, customers are coming and you can't supply. I mean, and it's all completely out of your own hand. It seems like, until you really get pushed into a corner and have to come up with creative solutions. We've had struggles with, and I think given the topic of today's conversation, right, to have the right owners and the right investors is so critical. I cannot overemphasize that enough. Don't just pick any money. You have to work with people that you can trust, that are aligned in your values, in your goals. And but when you're desperate for money, it's easy to take first check that comes your way. And I think several of the early days of problems in let's say Oatly, right, could be that we actually, a lot of them was that we were not aligned on the ownership side. And that was really frustrating, right? Which in some terms, I mean, led us to opportunities to buy out other investors that came in early, and maybe that was at the end of the day not a bad thing. But you know, it's again, you have to have taking money. It's like getting married in some ways, right? You are, you know, and you have your company's your child. You have a shared responsibility. You need to agree on how should that child look like, what are the values you want to, you know, transcend to it, and how should it behave in different types of situations. And it goes to say everybody could get that, right? That if you're not aligned, the risk of ending up in big trouble there is very large, big.
So pulling from all your experience of, you know, the good experience with investors and bad experience with investors, we have founders in the audience that are potentially, you know, in contact with one or two investors, or maybe just the one. How do you know? What can you do in the early days of that investor-founder relationship to understand, you know, is this someone I want to work with? Do you have any tips and tricks? What do you?
Well, one tip is, and it's easy to say, but maybe not necessarily so easy to live up to, but you need time, right? Don't rush it. But often we are rushed when we need money, right? But you need time, because it's not enough to meet the person now in this last year over Zoom only. It's really hard. You need to get to know people. You need to go out and have dinner and, like, you know, sit and just have these conversations about everything else but the business. It's kind of like dating, you know. You need to go on a date.
Yeah.
Forget the business, right? And just try to find that connection. And there's other parts of that too, of course, with selecting investors. There are passive investors, there are active investors, and there are passive active investors, right? And maybe those in between are the worst, because you never know where you have them. So in many ways, early stages, I do think passive investors are probably very helpful, a little bit depending on your own experience base. When you seek active investors, we tend to think they should bring relationships, they should bring contacts, industry insiders and whatnot. But if you're also coming with a revolutionary new disruptive technology, it's hard to find people that necessarily understand and get that the way you do. You're typically the subject matter expert. And it might be easy to be flattered and impressed by investors that have, you know, been successful in the past. Their previous success is no guarantee for any future success, right? That was there and then. That's gone. It's all about now and the future. So you know, don't stare yourself blind on an impressive resume.
And then thinking about, you know, dating, going on a lot of dates, you know, the relationship aspect, a lot of thinking about that, but then a lot of startups maybe even have problems getting to that first meeting. So the $1 million question, how do you find your first investor?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think in today's world, I wonder if it's that hard. I find in some sense it's almost, from my perspective, right? And I don't mean to sound to get out the wrong way, but it seems like there's too much money almost today looking for. I mean, if we're talking to my area, food technology, right? Ag tech, food tech, that space. It's not hard to find money today because there's so many forums. And I mean, Norrsken, for example, you're a good example of tying investors together. And I don't know how many funds are being started and have been started this last year during the pandemic, right? I get constantly contacted by people in Europe, in the US that want to get in and invest in this space. So I find it hard to believe that it's, you know, if you're a startup founder in anywhere in the world, talk to Norrsken, talk to, you know, it's 1 or 2 contacts and people should be able to start open doors for you. It's a very large infrastructure out there growing now, growing rapidly. And I think part of it is that it's hard to, food tech has been one of the best areas to invest in, period, of all categories over the last 2-3 years, right? Huh?
Smart thing to do to invest in the food tech industry today.
Right. There's a lot of good reasons for it, right? And I think let's say the IPO that Björn Meat did last year certainly shook the industry and the foundation of the capital industry quite dramatically, and now there's a stampede in there. So I think if you're now there, you may not have, you're young, you don't necessarily have contacts, right? Don't be afraid. Start making calls. There's a lot of people out there looking for you. So the chances are that, you know, you'll be inundated with contacts quickly.
And Björn, you didn't mention before that you sit and advise actually to food tech funds in the US. And right. You see a lot of pitch decks. You see a lot of fantastic solutions coming through. Now you're sitting on that side of the table, you see a lot of what's coming in. How do you stand out as a founder, as a startup? What is it that's going to make, you know, that you in this case or the investor tick? What's going to make
it's the $1 million question, right? It's hard. It's you know, what makes art, right? Some people can paint a white painting and it'll stand out. For others, it'll be
like, what are you looking for when you screen those pitches?
I think I'm looking for that emotional connection somewhere in there, that sign of true passion and true belief, right? And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, you know, that go into food tech, I think, for the wrong reasons, right? And they may not have a very clear picture of what they're actually trying to solve. Quite often you see confused business models. That what is the actual business model you're trying to develop here, and if you don't have a clear picture of that, that will very quickly transcend to a pitch deck and lead to some kind of unclarity, if not confusion, right? Although the deck may be perfect by all the sort of traditional standards in terms of graphics and disposition and flow and data and whatnot, right? But to me, that personal sort of passionate touch is critical.
What did your investment strategy look like at the beginning with Oatly?
In terms of getting investors on board, I think very early on, we looked for, we've gone through, it's an interesting experience, well worth, I guess, another long-term session where we've gone through, I believe, 3 phases of investors that we have in some sense replaced or changed focus, right? But in the very beginning, we looked for long-term investors. We knew we were up for a long haul because we had to educate the market about something that they'd never seen before. We had to get people to start changing behaviors. It's the most difficult thing you can possibly do, particularly when it comes to foods, right? If you want people to change behavior, you're up for the long haul. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's been really good for Oatly for sure, right? But it took 20 years. So if you're thinking of doing a quick buck, don't go looking for people to change behaviors. In that situation, we looked specifically for investors that were evergreen type funds and were passive, because we felt very clearly that there was really few people that could help us on our journey from the sort of the traditional investment side, particularly in Sweden at that time, right? So 20 years ago, and I think we talked about it before there, but one of my experiences from my first big mistake, I came from the IT industry. I have a history of starting a software company before I did computer security before I went to Oats, which everybody realizes is a very logical transition, right? But I knew nothing about the food industry, so I started interviewing and talking to a lot of eminent, experienced, seasoned foodies. And that was the first big mistake I ever did, because they all, of course, weren't, didn't have the disruptive mindset. And they were like, oh, well, this is how you do it, and this is the way you should do it. And we started off, first of all, they said, don't develop your own brand. It's way too expensive. It takes way too long time. So we started looking at an ingredient play in the beginning, which was like a complete disaster, right? And so a couple of years later, when we'd gone through, burnt our fingers hard, and we relaunched the idea and launched the Oatly brand, and that didn't happen until 2001. And as they say, the rest is history there. But for us then, the early learnings were long-term investors that are extremely passive. And I think we were successful in getting that. And that helped us until we started to get to the next phase in our development about 7-8 years later, when we needed to go international and realized that we absolutely need connections, networks. But maybe to a certain extent, you can build that yourself, but you needed a mindset among the owners that was, yes, gung-ho, let's go, let's take the West, right? If you didn't have, and we had those long-term passive investors were by definition very conservative in their thinking, which was appreciated in the beginning. But when we now saw a shift here, we need to go and we're going to build a global business. You really need the tone and the conversation at the board and among owners to shift from, ooh, that's scary. I know we can't, we should wait. We should partner with somebody that knows that, to, all right, we have an opportunity. How do we get it? How do we exploit this opportunity in Germany now? Not next year, but now, the best way, right? And that took a whole new set of investors to come on board, right? And so, you have to work through that.
And then you talked about 3 phases. The third phase now.
So now, I mean, Oatly entered that, you could say, last year with a very large investment, and that's when we got valued at 2 billion and became officially a unicorn, right? That's when we've always looked at Oatly as the startup, the underdog, the disruptor. All of a sudden, that's not Oatly anymore. Oatly is the big fish, right? The 800-pound gorilla, and driving an entire industry on a global basis. That's a whole different business altogether again, right? So now you need sort of big industry thinking. And you need to partner and get people that understand that part, right? Because we're global, Oatly is building a global business, manufacturing in 3 continents, and, market leadership position in pretty much every single market they enter, right? Yeah, that's the third shift. You need to, we need to adapt. We need to change. It's a new game now.
And the last investors that you brought on board, the most recent investors, you were heavily criticized for. What learnings did you draw from that process? Going back to, where we started out thinking about being able to choose your investors. What learnings did you draw from what happened?
Well, I think part of it is that you're not the underdog anymore, right? So now when you're a big player, you get exposure in all kinds of channels and ways that maybe you weren't expecting, and maybe we could have been a bit more prepared for that. I think the choice of investors, and that's a whole other conversation again, of course, was absolutely the right one. It was absolutely the right move, for many reasons I can't really talk about today because it's so recent, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. And I think one of the leading things is if you're a small disruptor, you go and you pick a fight with the big incumbent dairy companies and they sue you, and you can turn that to your advantage, right? When you are a big global player, it's a very different game. There's no point for a company in that position to bring in smaller activist funds, for example. They're already doing their job. They're doing their job, what they should be doing, and they should keep the activist funding. We need to change the incumbents. If we want to have a true change in this world, you need to get the big guys to change. And the only way to do that is to engage them. And that's what Oatly is doing. And I'm extremely proud of that. And I think that will talk about a legacy to build, right? And if you really want to change the world, and it's sort of, we're all, in different levels and different steps in our phase. And Oatly is in this incredible position to drive through global change right now. It's just such an incredible privilege, right?
You imagine that when you started out, where you would be right now.
Yeah, I remember when we saw the first cut of the first TV commercial with a relatively new CEO singing in an oat field, and the board were looking at, that's really cool. That would work now here in Sweden today. Cool, right? Had somebody said 6 years from now that'll be on Super Bowl, you were like, wouldn't quite believe that, right? But again, it's sort of, you have a company and you have to look at that company, where it is in its journey there and then, right? What's past is past, what's future, and it's, you have to play the game as smart as you can at every given point in time. And if that means repurpose an old ad, so be it.
And Björn, we're talking about disrupting an industry, changing the world. What should you not do when trying to disrupt an industry? We already touched upon not listening to the experts because they will not accept that, or they will not encourage those ideas. What else should you not do when trying to change the world?
Yes, to clarify, I mean, experts is a very broad definition, but I probably, what I mean when I say that in that context is to listen to the incumbents, right? To the people that are already there. Those are the ones. I mean, our classic example, and my brother's been referenced many times, when he had his first incarnation of the oat milk ready, he invited his buddy, old colleague that happened to be the head of R&D at Arla. And the guy came down from Stockholm and tried the product and spit it out and said unsellable and walked out. And that was like, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna get you for that. And I think payback is a bitch, as they say, right?
So be careful about who you listen to, essentially.
Yeah, be careful who you listen to, right? Certainly there are experts in some fields. I mean, that you should listen to. And it's kind of an oxymoron in some sense, because I'm sitting saying that, giving that advice now, and you could argue that I am that incumbent sort of now after 25 years in the industry. So why should anyone listen to me now? But
you're also founding company after company.
Yeah.
I mean, what you have in the pipeline is just incredibly interesting. Talking about new potential disruptors.
Yeah.
Right. What are you doing with those, like bringing the learnings from Oatly, again, thinking about how you're disrupting a whole industry? How are you thinking about that going ahead? Like, we want to change the world. How do we do it together? how can you use your product, your idea
Yeah.
to make that change?
I mean, there's a number of important and incredibly valuable learnings, obviously, from an Oatly journey about being a disruptor. Is you have to have guts, right? Because you're going against the stream, and people are going to say, no, that's not how it works. That's not what you do. And people are, investors going to say, no, you can't do that. That's not how it works. And so, tremendous guts. And then again, lead with your heart. If you really truly believe in something, right? That helps a lot. The heart is has more power than the brain in that sense, because with the brain it's easy to rationalize that, oh, maybe they're right, and then you go, you don't stick true to yourself. So I think that's a key part, and of course also try to be really when you're a disruptor, you have to attack a market from where nobody expects it to be attacked, right? So whether that's launching a worldwide brand to coffee shops, or you have to find that sort of hooks that with consumer groups. What's happened too on the consumer side is, I think, it's an incredible shift over the last couple of years, and with the Gen Z now coming in full force. A lot has changed, right? I mean, in terms of being purpose-driven, if you don't really have a true purpose and live an authentic purpose, you really live your vision and your message. Gen Zs will not, they will see through that. They won't follow you. And the Greta Thunberg effect, sort of, right? The militant activist. And they don't take shit for an answer, and that's a whole new paradigm. And in just a couple of years, I think 2029, according to data I've seen, Gen Z is the world's largest consumer group. So you have to win them today, because in just a couple of years they are dominating. And if you can't win them today, you're toast. So my friends in the dairy industry, right? They've lost Gen Z. They think they have trouble now. Wait a few years, and they'll see what trouble is, right? Which, by the way, to young entrepreneurs in the audience, if there's one there, if there's one industry that's prime and ripe for disruption, it's the dairy industry, because cows are not going to go away. We're going to have cows. Animals going to be there. It's just that we built an industry collectively in the world that's completely fucked up. Excuse my French, but what a great opportunity. The entrepreneur in me, I'm sitting there like next big thing is to rebuild the right type of dairy industry. Because again, the animals are there. We're not going to start slaughtering all the cows all over the world, right? Because they fart methane and et cetera, et cetera. They can actually be part of the solution if you do it right. There are plenty of examples of that. So there you go.
You're very aligned in that. From Norrsken's perspective, we see that the biggest global challenges are also the biggest opportunities, and not to say the least business opportunities. So I want to see more and more impact entrepreneurs enter that. Wrapping up then, Björn, what are the 3 things you would like to have known, when you first started out, or that now that you're using, for example, when scaling Good Idea Inc.? What are the 3 things?
Yeah.
Just like someone should have told me this.
Yeah, I guess it's the famous 3 T's, right? TTT. Things take time. Again, I mean, had somebody told us when we started with Oatly that it would take 20 years to reach this, you would have had a very different outlook at it. Now, I would say the journey has been such exciting and exhilarating and fun and fascinating that it's more like our experience has been, well, what? 20 years already? How did that happen, right? So it's all been very good in that sense, but really patience and take time. And I think we touched on the other 2, right? I'm working in Good Idea now. It's actually very fascinating. We're building with Oatly, we disrupted the dairy industry. With Good Idea, we're going to disrupt the water industry. We're launching a sparkling flavored water that balances your blood sugar. And has tons of health benefits, and it's really a beverage that everybody should drink every day. And I've actually hired the former founder and CEO of Fiji Water to build that here in the US. So he's done it before, right? And he always talks about the three-legged stool, about the product, the company, and the owners. And you need to have and that's a good image to keep in mind, right? If one of those three falter, it'll be a very uncomfortable chair to sit on. So look at it from that point of view.
Björn,
I don't know.
I think there was plenty of learnings here, lots of advice, really, really important. I appreciate you coming here, and I'm sure the audience and the founders appreciate that too. So enjoy the rest of your day. I know it's just early morning where you're at, so you have a whole work day ahead of you, and we know you're doing it with heart and passion. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. Thanks. Great questions.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.